Under my administration, free speech does not end at the steps of a cathedral or a synagogue or any other house of worship. We are giving our churches their voices back. We are giving them back in the highest form. With this executive order, we also make clear that the federal government will never, ever penalize any person for their protected religious beliefs.
That was President Trump Thursday signing an executive order on religious liberty that directs the IRS to relax a provision in the tax code known as the Johnson Amendment that bans churches and other tax-exempt organizations from engaging in political speech and campaign activities. The order also provides regulatory relief for organizations that object on religious grounds to an Obamacare provision requiring employers to provide certain health services, including coverage for contraception. Ralph Reed is the founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. He joins me now from Atlanta. Good to see you, Ralph. Thanks for coming in.
You bet, Paul. Good to be with you.
So you said this order is a good first step. How so?
Well, it's a very important first step because there are thousands of ministries and churches, Paul, over decades that have been subjected to harassment, audits that have gone on for years and remained open-ended, administrative persecution, such that they've had to spend tens of millions of dollars to try to keep from losing their tax-exempt status simply because the head of that church or ministry made one statement in their capacity as a private citizen in support of a candidate of their choice. That's wrong. It violates the First Amendment. This is something that has had a chilling effect on the political speech, First Amendment rights of people of faith, and Donald Trump put an end to that, and we're thrilled. It's just a first step. I want to be clear.
Yeah,
we still support full statutory repeal of the Johnson Amendment, and that has to be done legislatively.
I want to talk about the Johnson Amendment enforcement, because the argument you hear from a lot of folks is, you know what, the IRS doesn't really enforce this very much at all right now. So this amendment doesn't do very much more than just say to the IRS, enforce it even less. I mean, what's your response to that?
My response to that is the so-called experts that are pointing out that there's only been one case where a church lost their tax-exempt status under this provision, and that is correct, obviously haven't been running a major church ministry or Christian or other faith-based college or university in the last 30 years.
So they have to pay a lot of money to defend themselves against investigations. Is that the problem?
Paul, millions. I mean, this has been a full employment act for tax attorneys to fight the IRS at the cost of tens of millions of dollars that could have been used to feed the poor, to spread the gospel, to heal families and marriages, to get people off drugs and alcohol, and that money's gone to keep the right of people of faith to defend their First Amendment rights. And there's no reason for that kind of harassment. Look, if there's a problem in American politics today, if there's a problem with our civic discourse, it's not being caused because people of faith are raising their voices, whether it was the civil rights movement in the 60s or the pro-life and pro-family movement in more recent times. This is a bright thread in the fabric of our political discourse that we should be encouraging, not discouraging.
All right, let me ask you another one objection that some folks on the right have raised about this executive order is it doesn't go far enough to protect people of conscience, religious conscience, say the photographer or the cake maker, who says, you know what, my religion says I can't serve at a gay wedding, for example, that there's no protections in this order for them. And there was, at least some people thought, in the earlier draft that was leaked. Now it's out. What's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is if you actually read the text of the executive order, and I've read it, what it does is it directs the Secretary of Health and Human Services to write new regulations that protect religious liberty with respect to what remains of Obamacare as we dismantle it. That's the Little Sisters of the Poor case. The other thing it does is it directs the Attorney General to provide similar guidance to protect First Amendment rights, free speech rights, and religious liberty across all departments of government. So this is going to be an incremental process. But, Paul, I do want to be clear about something. I helped pass the Federal Religious Freedom Act in the early 90s, and there are now state religious freedom statutes on the books in over 30 states. Paul, there has never been a case in 25 years of litigation under any state religious freedom statute or under the federal statute that gives the right of a business run by a person of faith to deny services to someone because they are a gay or lesbian. That has been litigated. It has never won, and I don't think you can solve that by an executive order. So I think the critics are asking for something that can't be accomplished under an executive order.
All right. Would you agree with me that the most significant act that this president's made so far on religious liberty was putting Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court?
No question about it. I mean, if you look, one of the things that I was a little concerned about, and I'm not an attorney, I'm hoping the case can proceed, but the Little Sisters of the Poor case is still technically pending before the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
They were deadlocked 4-4 before Gorsuch was confirmed. I believe we now have a 5-4 pro-religious freedom majority back on the court. That case was remanded back to the appellate court. I hope it can still proceed, because even though President Trump solved a good chunk of the problem with his executive order, a future president could recreate the problem. So I hope the Supreme Court will still take the case and dispense with this mistreatment of faith-based ministries and their right to express their religious freedom.